Good Tuesday morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us from the Ohio AgNet, the voice you know with the News You Trust studio, sponsored by the Grant Equipment Company, where innovation meets execution. I'm Joe Everett. Well, currently 62 degrees outside here at the farm this morning, and it's nice to see that it's not raining outside. We'll have a full forecast update for you shortly to see when farmers can get back in the fields. But now let's check in with Dusty Sonnenberg, as today is not just your average day, it's National Nematode Day.
I'm joined today by Dr. Horacio Lopez Nicora. He is our soybean pathologist and nematologist at The Ohio State University. Horacio, happy National Nematode Day.
Yes, happy National Nematode Day for sure.
Well, it's a big day around the nation celebrating something that we really can't necessarily see unless it's maybe this time of year when we get in the cab of the combine and we're watching that yield monitor.
Yes, strategically, the SCN Coalition launched this day mainly to serve as an awareness, bring awareness to growers about this very damaging pathogen of soybean. But not only soybeans is nematode, there are other plant parasitic nematodes that are posing threat to soybean production across the U.S., southern part of the United States. We have other nematodes such as the root knot nematode or reniform nematodes that cause really significant yield reduction to soybean. In the Midwest, we're mainly concerned with soybeans is nematode. It continues, and it is really the main and most important pathogen of soybean. And this is something that year after year we have been getting together with field crop pathologists and sharing what we've seen in our research plot. And year after year, soybean cyst nematode just ranked number one pest of soybean. So a very important economically damaging pathogen that will rob yield, producing very little, if no above ground symptoms. And this is because of the biology of this animal, because it is an animal that can penetrate the root system of the soybean plant and completely modify cells. These cells will now be modified to feed this pathogen for their entire life cycle. The nematode now becomes sedentary, cannot move, and feeds on the nutrients of the plant. And the plant looks healthy, unless we have other stressors. Of course, once numbers just reach levels that can really bring and collapse the plant, we will not see symptoms. We will not see the typical yellowing or stunting of plant like other plant parasitic nematodes or other pathogens can cause. So we can end up a season thinking that we had the most beautiful and productive soybean season, yet on average, and we have research data on this, we're leaving 30% of the yield below ground. And some years this can translate to leaving $300 per acre without even realizing. So the question comes to, what should I do then? You're telling me that I can be losing a lot of my soybean production without realizing that I have a problem. And the SCN Coalition recommends this proactive management, which involves sampling your field, collecting a soil sample, which most of the time we are doing it because we are sending soil samples to a soil lab for nutrient analysis. The same way we collect that sample, the same way we can do it for soybean cyst nematode. As a matter of fact, after collecting that composite sample we're going to send to a soil lab, a subsample of that can be sent to the nematology lab so we can know if we have soybean cyst nematode, and if we do, hopefully not, know our numbers, how much we have it, because those levels will dictate our management strategy. Rotate to a known host. Corn, for example, it's a way that we will start reducing population levels in our fields. Rotate soybean with resistance to soybean cyst nematode. And I'm saying rotate because we don't want to feed the nematode with the same genetic material over and over. We want to avoid the nematode to adapt and reproduce on the same genetic material. So we will rotate soybeans with different sources of resistance. And then we want to also consider a seed treatment, enhance that root health overall during that season. And these are recommendations that the SCN Coalition promotes. And you can go to the website, like you mentioned, the SCN Coalition, and find a lot of resources there, infographic that can guide you how to sample a field to send and submit samples for SCN testing or the different management strategies that we are recommending.
Again, my guest today, Dr. Horacio Lopez Nicora. He is our soybean pathologist and nematologist here in Ohio, celebrating National Nematode Day. Horacio, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Dusty.
Hey, thanks, Dusty. We'll be back to take a look at today's weather after this.
Farmers, be safe moving from field to field this season. Keep your warning lights clean and in good working order for roadway travel. Take a few minutes to check your lights and reflectors and make sure your slow-moving vehicle emblem is visible as you share the road. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. This message provided to you by the Ohio AgNet, OSU Extension Ag Safety and Health Team, and this station.
Now let's see when farmers can expect to get back in the fields. Today's weather is brought to you by Seek Consultants. Simply better performance online at seekconsultants.com. Here's the forecast.
We've got drier weather trying to unfold over the Buckeye State this week. I'm Chief Meteorologist Ryan Martin with a look at your Ohio Ag weather update. For the next 24 hours, still seeing a decent amount of cloud cover, kind of wrapping on the backside of the low, which was Helene. It's moving away off to the east and north, but again, on again, off again, clouds through the day today. And I won't rule them out overnight tonight into tomorrow. I think there's less in the forecast tomorrow, but just clouds. I'm not worried about moisture at all. Any moisture that we see trying to develop over the Great Lakes and Michigan is likely going to stay up there, so I'm not worried about big rounds of moisture, just clouds that may slow drying ever so slightly. By the time we get into Wednesday, full sunshine. Temperatures aren't too shabby all the rest of this week. We see good drying, so we're dry Wednesday, Thursday. I'm going to give you Friday and Saturday, most of Sunday as well. One thing about Friday, there's a minor disturbance that seems to want to be coming across the Great Lakes as cool air comes down out of Canada, and so that may trigger some clouds over northern Indiana and into northwest Ohio Friday afternoon. Do I think it's going to produce rain? No, at this point I don't. I think we stay dry, but that cool air as it dives in also gets a reinforcing shot for the late weekend, such that I think we see rain develop overnight, Sunday night through Monday morning to midday in Ohio. Could see a tenth to half an inch there, coverage around 75% of the Buckeye State. Behind it, we are cool for sure to start the work week. Monday the 7th, below normal temperatures for a bit, and Tuesday could be a little cool to start as well for the 8th, but temperatures warm back up. We are fully dry all week long, so that means we get to go right back to harvest. Yeah, I know that some areas of the state, particularly south and southwest Ohio, got way more rain from Helene than areas farther north, so that is only going to affect our ability to get into the fields, I think, this week. Maybe have some more trouble down south than we do up north this week. By next week, when the dry air is here, we're back in the field full bore everywhere. I'm Ryan Martin.
Hey, thanks, Ryan. Well, yesterday, the USDA Weekly Crop Progress Report came out. Let's take a look at those numbers. The Ohio Crop Progress Report update is sponsored by AgriSpray Drones, empowering rural America through complete spray drone solutions. You can contact them at agrispraydrones.com/Arnold Precision. Starting with the national numbers, corn dented was estimated at 96%, 1 point behind last year's 97%, but 1 point ahead of the 5-year average of 95%. Corn matured was rated at 75%, 4 points behind last year's 79%, but 5 points ahead of the 5-year average of 70%. As for the harvest progress, it picked up a little bit last week, moving ahead 7 percentage points to reach 21% complete. As for the crop condition, corn in the field was rated 64% was in good to excellent condition, down 1 point from 65% the previous week. Now looking at soybeans dropping leaves were pegged at 81%, 1 point behind last year's 82%, but 8 points ahead of the 5-year average of 73%. As for the harvest progress, it gained momentum, moving 13 percentage points to reach 26% complete this week. That is 6 points ahead of last year's 20% and 8 points ahead of the 5-year average of 18%. Its crop condition was rated 64% of the soybeans in the field were in good to excellent condition, unchanged from the previous week. As for winter wheat planting moved ahead to 14 points, ahead to reach 39% nationwide, 3 points ahead of last year's 36%, and 1 point ahead of the 5-year average of 38%. As for its crop condition, estimated 14% of the winter wheat was emerged as of Sunday, 1 point ahead of both last year and the 5-year average of 13%. Now looking at the numbers from the Buckeye State, topsoil moisture conditions were rated 53% short to very short. The average temperature last week was 68.3 degrees, 8.6 degrees above normal. Corn dented was pegged at 96%, that is 2 points ahead of last week, 11 points ahead of last year, and 9 points ahead of the 5-year average. Corn matured was rated at 70% this week. That jumped 10 points over last week and 22 points ahead of last year and 20 points ahead of the 5-year average. Corn harvested for grain was rated at 16%. That jumped 6 points over last week and is 11 points ahead of the 5-year average. Corn harvested for silage was rated at 91% complete. That jumped 4 points over last week and is 21 points ahead of last year and 9 points ahead of the 5-year average. Soybeans dropping leaves are at 86%. That jumped 8 points over last week and is 15 points ahead of the 5-year average. Soybeans harvested made some gain and are at 23% complete this week. That jumped 9 points over last week and is 19 points ahead of last year and 13 points ahead of the 5-year average. Winter wheat planted is at 17% complete this week. That jumped 13 points ahead of last week and is 1 point ahead of the 5-year average. As for the crop condition, corn was rated 39% good to excellent, while soybeans were rated at 44% good to excellent. In other news, the USDA released its September 1st grain stocks report, which showed old crop corn stocks in all positions totaled 1.76 billion bushels, up 29% from September 1st last year. Of the total stock, 780 million bushels are stored on farms, 29% higher than it was last year. Off-farm stocks at 980 million bushels were up 30% from a year ago. Old crop soybeans stored in all positions on September 1st, 2024 totaled 342 million bushels, up 29% from September 1st of last year. Soybean stocks on all farms totaled 111 million bushels, 54% higher than in 2023. Off-farm stocks are 20% above last year. All wheat stored in all positions on September 1st totaled 1.99 billion bushels, up 12% from a year ago. On-farm stocks are 42% higher than they were last year at 664 million bushels. Off-farm stocks at 1.32 billion bushels are 13% higher than the year earlier. It's now time for the Louis Dreyfus Grain Analysis, and that is brought to you by the Ohio Soybean Council and your soybean checkoff. Here's Ryan Martin.
Strong day to the upside last Friday on corn and soybeans. Wheat markets did not participate. Here's what's going on as we take a look at how action and markets are going to move this week. Last Friday, the sharp rally came on end of quarter, end of month buying. Remember, today we have a big report. It's September 30th, and we have the quarterly grain stocks report. These are the numbers as of what we had on hand. And so I think last Friday there was a little bit of position squaring ahead of that report. Also, things to watch this week. What's going to happen with the port strike? That's right. We've got a longshoreman strike that's still being talked about for tomorrow. I think if the strike actually happens, it will be very short-lived before government entities get involved. Remember the whole concern over railroad strikes, and not just here in the U.S., but up in Canada as of late. Governments stepped in pretty quick to try and get those under control, or at least get people back to work. So I don't think the port strike is a big thing to worry about, but we'll have to see. China was said to be a buyer of Board of Trade shortly after the opening last Friday. That spilled into new fund demand for soy meal on chart moves. There really wasn't a whole lot else out there to get too excited about. However, looking at some of the yields that have come in on harvest so far, there's more and more people thinking that some of these high yield estimates that we were seeing early on aren't going to be quite so high. And that's fueled by mostly what we're hearing in the East. The yields here nowhere near what they could have been before that flash drought really settled in for August into the first half of September. Corn yields are all over the place so far, but still better than expected in most places so far. So that's part of the reason why beans are interesting, but corn has been somewhat boring over the last few weeks. USDA reported sales of 20,000 metric tons of soy oil to South Korea last Friday. That was the first daily soy sale that had been announced since April of 2023. Now, the oil market didn't really get all that excited, but it's something to pay attention to as we move forward this week. I'm Ryan Martin.
Hey, thanks, Ryan. Now let's take a look at your overnight markets, brought to you by Seed Consultants. Simply better performance online at seedconsultants.com. Well, a lot of red in Chicago. Let's start off with December corn, 423, down 1 3/4. March corn, 439 3/4, down 1 1/2. November soybeans, 1051, down 6. January soybeans, 1069 1/4, down 6. December wheat, 581, down 3. Looking at livestock from yesterday's close, October live cattle 183.77, up 2 cents. December live cattle 184.80, up 32 cents. October lean hogs 82.25 up 20 cents. December lean hogs 73.27 down 10 cents. November feeder cattle 244.90 down 80 cents, and January feeder cattle 238.77 down 82 cents. This is the Ohio AgNet.